Jasper said that even though they still hadn't found his watch, they should visit the woman anyway. Levi agreed and suggested they buy a small gift so they wouldn't arrive empty-handed. Soon they entered a small grocery store. The saleswoman immediately looked terrified when she noticed that the two boys were wearing psychiatric hospital pajamas. Levi politely approached the counter and explained that they wanted to buy a box of milk as a gift for their friend. However, they awkwardly admitted that they didn't have any money. The poor girl behind the counter was trembling with fear. She clearly didn't want to give away the merchandise for free, but at the same time she was afraid of arguing with people she believed might be mentally unstable. In the end, she nervously told them that they could just take the milk box for free. After leaving the store, the boys soon arrived at the woman's home. Since it was already late at night, they decided it would be better not to wake her. So they quietly placed the milk box beside the door and prepared to head back to the clinic. The next morning, Sophia's daughter discovered the box sitting outside their apartment door and told her mother about it. Sophia opened the door and was surprised to see that a full carton of milk had actually been left there. She wondered aloud who could have left such a gift. Their conversation was overheard by a bald, middle-aged neighbor who lived nearby. The man quickly stepped out of his apartment and claimed that the milk actually belonged to him. According to him, the delivery person must have accidentally left it at the wrong door. Sophia asked politely if he was certain that the order was really his. The man suddenly became furious and began shouting. He said that someone like her had no right to accuse him of lying, especially when his financial situation made such suspicion ridiculous. Sophia quickly explained that she hadn't meant anything offensive and didn't understand why he was reacting so harshly. But the man grew even more threatening. He warned that if she kept interfering in other people's business, he would go to her daughter's school and expose rumors about her. Frightened, Sophia lowered her head, apologized, and went back into her apartment. Later, his son asked why he had brought home another box of milk. The man proudly replied that someone had left it for the woman across the hall, but he had taken it for himself because she had no power to stop him. Suddenly, he felt a strange dizziness spreading through his head. Within seconds, his legs gave out beneath him and he collapsed heavily onto the floor. Meanwhile, the story shifted to another clinic where Dr. Lee worked. He was angrily calling the psychiatric hospital director, complaining that he had only recently signed a cooperation agreement and had already received dozens of patients. Just then, a nurse rushed into his office and nervously told him that those two men had come again. The doctor stared at her in horror, immediately realizing who she was talking about. He dropped to his knees and screamed in panic. In his mind, those two should have been devoured by a 7th-rank demon long ago. They should have been dead and gone. But at that exact moment, his worst fears were confirmed when Levi and Jasper casually walked into his office. They cheerfully explained that the doctor had been so friendly to them before that they missed him and wanted to visit. Right then the phone rang. Principal Sean was calling and calmly informed the doctor that he had forgotten to mention something important. Levi and Jasper had survived. He explained that he hadn't expected them to survive either, but apparently they had secretly escaped during the night. Since he could now hear their voices in the office, he assumed they had come to visit the doctor. Hearing all of this, tears of despair slowly rolled down the doctor's face. He realized that the director had tricked him into signing that cooperation agreement and had played with his emotions. At that moment, he swore he would never forgive him. Without another word, he grabbed the boys by the shoulders and hurriedly pushed them out of his office, telling them not to come back again. He explained that besides dealing with countless patients, he also had financial matters to handle that day, so he simply didn't have time to deal with them. As they walked down the hospital corridor, they noticed a large crowd gathered in the lobby watching something happening. Levi suddenly realized that he recognized one of the voices. It sounded like Sophia. As it turned out, Sophia was in the middle of a fight with the wife of the man who had collapsed earlier. The furious woman accused Sophia of seducing her husband and causing him to suffer a stroke. The angry wife grabbed Sophia by the hair and began shaking her violently, demanding that she confess to something she had never done. Then she raised her hand, preparing to slap Sophia across the face. But before the blow could land, Levi rushed forward and grabbed the woman's wrist. He calmly told her that hitting someone like that was wrong. The woman stared at him in shock and anger, demanding to know who he thought he was. Then she noticed the clothes he was wearing and realized they were psychiatric hospital pajamas. She immediately shouted that he must be crazy and ordered him to let her go. At the same time, Jasper hurried over to Sophia and helped her stand up. Two people nearby began supporting the angry wife, loudly asking how Sophia could dare call a psychopath to defend her. When the crowd realized that Levi and Jasper were actually psychiatric patients, many people quickly backed away in fear. Sophia quietly thanked the boys for helping her and asked Levi to release the woman. But Levi shook his head and replied that since she had tried to hurt Sophia, she deserved to learn a proper lesson. The woman stared straight into the boy's wild, almost frightening eyes. In that unsettling gaze, her imagination began running away with her, picturing all kinds of terrifying things, how those same eyes might look while he tortured her without mercy. Overwhelmed by the fear and shame rising inside her, she suddenly burst into tears. Through her sobs, she swore again and again that she would never repeat such a terrible mistake, promising with trembling sincerity that she had truly learned her lesson. After things calmed down a little, Sophia wiped her eyes and looked toward the boys with uncertainty. In a quiet voice, she asked them if that entire box of milk they mentioned had really been left there specifically for her. Jasper nodded casually and explained that the boys had quietly placed the box at her doorstep the previous night. According to him, it was simply their small way of showing gratitude for the snake stew she had kindly prepared for them. Hearing this, the girl's face softened into a warm smile, though her eyes quickly filled with tears again. Clearly touched by their kindness, she thanked the boys again and again for the milk, her voice full of sincere appreciation. Just then, Dr. Lee abruptly stepped into their conversation. With a stern expression, he grabbed the boys firmly by the collars and scolded them, saying they couldn't just wander around the hospital area aimlessly as if they had nothing better to do. At that exact moment, Christopher suddenly appeared behind the doctor, accompanied by several imposing bodyguards and a well-dressed woman. She calmly explained that the young master had come personally today to review and determine the level of financial support the hospital would receive. The doctor immediately let go of Jasper and Levi, pushing them aside without hesitation. Then he hurried toward Christopher with great enthusiasm, eagerly thanking him for coming and energetically shaking his hand as if greeting an important benefactor. While exchanging greetings, Christopher suddenly noticed that his new friends were standing nearby. Recognizing him right away, the boys walked over and casually explained that they had come to the hospital to visit an old acquaintance. Hearing this, Christopher smiled and spoke without hesitation. Since Dr. Lee was clearly a friend of his friends, he decided there was no need for a complicated hospital audit and announced that the institution would simply receive the highest level of financial assistance. After making that generous decision, Christopher added that he planned to take Jasper and Levi with him for a while. First they would get cleaned up and take a proper bath, and afterward he would personally make sure they returned home safely. As a sleek car pulled up in front of them, Christopher turned toward his butler with curiosity. He asked why the special forces had been appearing everywhere lately, since he had noticed their patrols increasing more and more throughout the streets. The butler explained calmly that several new defensive installations had recently been placed around the hospital. These structures were designed specifically to detect the presence of demons that might try to sneak into the area. He added that such heavy security measures were usually only deployed during wartime or during extremely dangerous situations when the city expected serious threats. Hearing that explanation, Christopher quietly thought about it for a moment. A troubling feeling crept into his mind, and he began to suspect that something truly dangerous might be approaching the city. Meanwhile, on a different street not too far away, a third-rank demon in the form of a rooster was secretly wandering through the city. The demon rooster felt deeply irritated. Despite hiding carefully and keeping a low profile, it had still been discovered somehow. It couldn't understand why the special forces had suddenly become so alert and watchful. Nearby, the warriors continued searching the streets thoroughly. The demon, sensing danger, crouched quietly behind a large trash can and tried to remain completely silent so it wouldn't be detected. As it hid there, the demon complained bitterly to itself. It regretted not being cute enough to pass as a harmless creature. If it could become a human's pet like those adorable animals, it would secretly devour people one by one and rise as a hero among demons. Before long, Christopher and his friends finally arrived at his enormous home, a luxurious villa that stood proudly behind tall gates. Once inside, Christopher immediately prepared a hot bath for them. He encouraged the boys to wash themselves properly and relax after everything they had been through. About an hour later, after everyone was refreshed and clean, Christopher brought them into the spacious living room. Smiling proudly, he told them they could move in and stay there right away if they wanted. He also explained that he had already contacted the director of a psychiatric clinic. According to the plan, the staff would come tomorrow and take care of bringing the boys back safely. The moment Jasper saw the massive bed in the room, his eyes lit up with excitement. He had clearly never seen a bed that big and comfortable before. As the three of them climbed onto the huge bed together, Christopher spoke honestly. He admitted that he had never really had friends before. Since his parents were always abroad, he had never shared a bed with anyone, and he wanted his very first experience like this to be with friends. Jasper laughed warmly and said that in that case they would all simply enjoy a good, peaceful night's sleep together. Christopher smiled happily at that thought, feeling strangely comforted. Soon afterward, he closed his eyes and drifted into sleep. However, sometime in the middle of the night, he suddenly woke up. The reason was painfully clear. The room was filled with incredibly loud snoring. Lying there in the darkness, listening to the relentless noise, Christopher came to an important realization about something very practical. From that night onward, he quietly decided that it might actually be much better for him to always sleep alone. Meanwhile, outside Christopher's villa, something rather suspicious was unfolding. The same kidnappers who had once abducted the boy quietly lifted a heavy sewer hatch. One of them explained that the underground sewer tunnel connected directly to the courtyard of the villa. As they climbed down into the dark passage, Levi hesitated, feeling uneasy about breaking into the territory of the city's richest man again. The leader, however, told him not to panic. With a confident grin, he claimed that he had already carried out operations like this hundreds of times before. At that very moment, Levi suddenly opened his eyes. Turning his head, he noticed that Christopher was awake as well. Calmly, he commented that the boy seemed to have woken up surprisingly early today. Levi then informed Christopher that he apparently had visitors arriving. He even asked jokingly why the young master wasn't planning to greet his guests properly. Christopher, confused, couldn't imagine who would visit him at such a strange hour. Levi explained casually that the visitors were currently underground. By the time the kidnappers finally climbed out of the hatch, Christopher's guards were already waiting for them. The guards quickly dragged the men outside. Even while being restrained, the kidnappers stubbornly insisted that they were simply sewer maintenance workers. Christopher listened calmly, and then said that if they truly were utility workers, they should be allowed to continue their sewer work. At that moment, the protagonist suddenly remembered something. These same men had already caused trouble for Christopher once before. Because of that past offense, they decided to punish the kidnappers by sending them right back down into the foul sewer tunnel filled with waste. Later on, Christopher and the protagonist sat quietly in the courtyard. The butler suggested that the young master return to his bedroom, but Christopher simply said he felt perfectly comfortable staying outside. At that moment, the system suddenly notified Levi. It had detected a source of extremely high-energy food capable of keeping him satisfied for 4 full days without hunger, located about 5,000 meters away. Hearing this, the protagonist immediately said he had some urgent business to take care of. Without wasting another second, he quickly rushed off toward the location. Meanwhile, the demon rooster was still desperately hiding from the Special Forces soldiers who continued searching the streets. The soldiers discussed the situation seriously. The energy waves from a third-rank demon moved constantly, and such creatures often tried to devour humans to speed up their evolution. That meant they needed to locate it as quickly as possible. At that moment, a young girl was running along the street. She had stayed late at school finishing her work and was now hurrying home because her mother would surely be worried. Watching her from the shadows, the demon rooster decided she would make the perfect victim. If he managed to eat her, he believed he could immediately advance to the 4th rank. With that greedy thought, the demon suddenly launched forward, using its ability to move instantly and chase the girl. But just as it prepared to bite her, something unexpected happened. A hand suddenly grabbed the rooster firmly by the neck. It turned out to be Levi. He held the struggling rooster in one hand while staring at it with a cold, intimidating expression. Then he casually showed the strange creature to the frightened girl and asked her if she thought it looked cute. The girl decided it would be safer not to argue with this odd stranger. Nervously, she nodded and said the rooster was indeed very cute. Levi laughed softly, clearly amused, and said that he agreed with her completely. Meanwhile, the demon rooster slowly began losing consciousness as Levi's grip tightened around its neck, cutting off its air. The next morning, the exhausted kidnappers finally finished cleaning out the entire sewer system and reported their work to Christopher's guards. One guard told them that he had watched them working all night. Impressed by their effort and skill, he said they had done an excellent job and handed them money on behalf of the young master. The men stared at the payment in disbelief. They had never expected that their miserable night of labor would actually earn them money. One of them suddenly remembered something from long ago. A wandering sage once told him he had spent half his life walking down a dark and dangerous path, but fate would eventually push him toward change. Holding the money in his hands, he realized that the old prophecy had finally come true. From that moment onward, he decided he would try to walk a completely different path in life. Meanwhile, Jasper slowly woke up from his deep sleep, stretching lazily as the morning light quietly filled the room. He had slept incredibly well throughout the entire night. When he finally opened his eyes, the first thing he noticed was his friend standing nearby, casually holding a rooster in his hands. However, Levi stubbornly kept insisting that the creature was simply a chicken. The demon rooster was immediately offended by this. With great indignation, he protested that he was clearly a rooster, not some ordinary chicken. After all, if he were truly just a simple chicken, there was no way he could have survived being held by the neck by this terrifying guy for an entire night. Jasper, however, looked completely delighted. Smiling brightly, he leaned closer and cheerfully announced that the chicken actually looked incredibly cute. Hearing that comment, the demon felt strangely relieved. Since these humans thought he was cute and harmless, he started to believe that his life was probably safe for the moment. But Jasper suddenly made a new suggestion. With curiosity in his voice, he proposed that they should fry this chicken and see what it tasted like. The protagonist immediately liked the idea. He glanced at the demon with a sly, conspiratorial smile, clearly imagining the meal already. The rooster's expression twisted into pure horror. In just a moment, the boys suddenly commented that this once cute chicken had somehow become extremely ugly and unpleasant to look at. Jasper then thoughtfully suggested another idea. Chickens could lay eggs, he explained, so it might actually be smarter to keep her alive and collect eggs every morning so they could enjoy scrambled eggs for breakfast every day. When the demon heard this terrifying plan, he was completely horrified, realizing these two lunatics were seriously discussing his future. Levi calmly added that they should patiently wait until this chicken laid at least 2 eggs for them. The demon was now completely lost and panicking internally. Roosters simply did not lay eggs, and the entire situation was humiliating and deeply damaging to his dignity as a demon. Then the main character shrugged and suggested that since the chicken clearly couldn't lay eggs, it would probably be better to just cook it and make a nice bowl of soup instead. At that moment, the demon suddenly realized he had no choice left. If he wanted to survive, he somehow needed to produce an egg for these two completely insane humans. Although he felt deep shame for what he was about to do, he tried to comfort himself by thinking of it as a temporary strategic decision for survival. After some time passed, the boys happily carried the freshly laid eggs into the kitchen and asked the butlers to cook scrambled eggs for breakfast. The demon watched in complete horror as these humans forced him to witness the cooking process, frying what he considered the precious product of his own body. Helplessly, the demon could only watch as his eggs slowly turned into a plate of fluffy scrambled eggs. When everyone finally sat down around the dining table, Jasper cheerfully said that he hoped their hen would lay several eggs for them every single morning. Hearing this, the demon burned with anger and humiliation. To him, the entire situation was nothing short of absolute disgrace. Meanwhile, back at headquarters, Tracy delivered an important report. She explained that all hospitals and schools across the city had already been protected with 6th-tier defensive structures, along with specialized devices capable of detecting demonic energy waves. Installation in residential districts would begin soon. After hearing the report, The one-eyed man turned toward the others in the room. He calmly asked about the progress of constructing the 9th-rank defensive barrier around the entire city and when it would finally be completed. One of the officials replied that most of the preparation work was already finished. However, the massive 9th-rank defensive formation required an enormous amount of energy to function properly. He explained that once the formation was installed, activating it would require pouring a tremendous amount of internal energy directly into the system. Because of that heavy requirement, they had already requested assistance from the Central General Staff as well as several nearby cities. Tracy added that defeating a national-level demon quickly would require the help of at least 2 additional national-rank warriors. Otherwise, regardless of whether the battle happened inside the city or outside its walls, the entire city could still end up being completely destroyed. The one-eyed man reported with frustration that nearby cities had already refused their request for assistance. Without clear evidence of a national-rank demon, those cities had no reason to risk sending their strongest warriors away. Tracy then declared firmly that she would personally travel to General Headquarters and submit a direct report requesting urgent support. At that moment, the one-eyed man stood up slowly from his desk. He calmly stated that he trusted Stephen completely and believed that a national-rank demon had indeed been discovered. Tracy looked at him with confusion and asked where he planned to go. The man simply replied that he had some personal matters to handle first. Later that morning, Christopher personally escorted his friends back to the psychiatric clinic. On the way, the butler quietly mentioned that Levi wasn't holding an ordinary rooster at all. According to him, it was actually a 3rd-rank demon. However, Christopher casually remarked that the creature seemed completely terrified of Levi. Christopher then said calmly that in that case there was nothing to worry about. He fully believed Levi was more than capable of handling such a creature. When the boys finally arrived at the clinic entrance, the director approached them with curiosity and asked if they had really gone to buy milk at a 24-hour store. Jasper nodded honestly and admitted that it was indeed them. However, they didn't actually have enough money to pay for the milk because they only wanted to give it to their friend. The director laughed nervously and explained that before Levi's mother went abroad, she had already left a considerable amount of money for him at the hospital. But when it came to Jasper, the situation was completely different. The director admitted that he didn't even know how long Jasper had been staying in the hospital. During all those years, at least throughout the decades he had worked there, no one had ever sent money for the boy. After hearing this, Levi immediately said that half of his own money should be used to support Jasper as well. The director glared at Levi and asked threateningly how many times he had already been taken into the operating room, hinting that Levi might not actually have as much money as he thought. He then warned both boys very seriously not to buy anything again. At the moment, they had no money of their own, and they simply couldn't afford such expenses. The demon rooster silently observed the situation. Although these 2 boys were incredibly strong, they behaved like obedient kittens in front of this man. The demon began to suspect that the director might secretly be a national-rank warrior. Soon, Sean shifted his attention toward the strange chicken. Levi explained casually that he had caught the creature earlier, and now it laid eggs for them, so they wanted to keep it as their pet. The director frowned with doubt. To him, the creature clearly looked more like a rooster than a hen. Meanwhile, the one-eyed man had already arrived at room 666. Suddenly, he sensed the presence of powerful energy waves belonging to a 3rd-rank demon. When he stepped out into the corridor to investigate, he immediately saw Levi and Jasper standing there, casually holding a chicken in their hands. In that instant, the one-eyed man realized that the creature they were carrying was actually the very same 3rd-rank demon he had been searching for. Without hesitation, he raised his palm, gathering powerful energy around it as he prepared to strike and eliminate the demon immediately. However, Levi quickly grabbed the man's arm, firmly stopping him before he could harm their pet. Levi calmly explained that the creature was actually a very good hen because it laid eggs for them. The one-eyed man was stunned. He couldn't believe that Levi had stopped his attack so easily without showing any sign of effort. Although he had only used about 40% of his strength, the boy still blocked the strike effortlessly. The man then activated a powerful technique called the 1,000 Demon Seal to imprison the demon. But Levi moved lightly and avoided the attack with surprising ease. At that moment, The system warned Levi that the technique was extremely dangerous and advised him to use instant movement to dodge it. Otherwise, his power could be sealed for 25 minutes. Levi calmly explained that he had no intention of fighting the one-eyed man. However, he simply could not allow anyone to harm his chicken. 3 hours later, Levi still didn't have a single scratch on his body, while the one-eyed man was already exhausted from the prolonged battle. At that moment, he finally realized something important. The boy clearly hadn't even used the full extent of his strength yet. Watching the terrifying aura surrounding the warrior, the demon rooster trembled in fear. He couldn't understand why such unbelievably powerful warriors kept appearing around these two strange boys. The one-eyed man finally lowered his hand and spoke in a calmer tone. He explained that he had no intention of killing the chicken, and he also didn't want to start a pointless fight. Instead, he simply wanted to have a serious conversation with the boy. Jasper nodded confidently and said that the man didn't seem dangerous at all. In fact, he felt that the one-eyed man was a decent person who could probably be trusted. Hearing that, the protagonist casually handed the demon rooster over to Jasper. After that, he followed the one-eyed man so they could talk privately and sort things out face to face. The one-eyed man led him farther down the corridor and away from the ward, making sure they were somewhere quiet where no one else could overhear their conversation. Meanwhile, Jasper was left alone with the demon rooster. Looking at the terrified creature, he suddenly suggested that he could try giving the rooster a little acupuncture treatment. Soon afterward, the one-eyed man and the protagonist stepped outside into the garden area. The man slowly reminded him about the day when the leaders of the beginner trials and the sacred mission had gathered here. He continued quietly, explaining that every single one of those leaders had ultimately fallen in battle. Then the one-eyed man turned his attention back to the boy and admitted that he could sense how powerful he was. Even though he couldn't clearly measure his strength yet, the boy had easily dodged some of his strongest attacks. Because of that, the man had already come to a clear conclusion. Levi was definitely far stronger than he appeared on the surface. He went on to say that the entire city was currently facing a very serious threat. At any moment, demons might begin attacking the city in large numbers. With a heavy voice, he asked the protagonist a difficult question. If he were to fall in battle someday, could he trust Levi to help protect the fate of the city? A short time later, the one-eyed man returned to the clinic director and placed 2 special employment contracts from the special forces on the desk. Sean looked very pleased when he saw the documents. He was especially impressed that the one-eyed man had even managed to convince Tracy to approve their involvement. However, the one-eyed man explained that Tracy would never officially allow mentally ill patients to join the special forces. So for now, Levi and Jasper would only serve as guest fighters. They wouldn't receive full staff privileges or benefits. The one-eyed man spoke honestly. Anyone who truly worked for the safety of the city deserved respect. Even if these two didn't fully understand what they were doing yet, he would still be grateful if they continued protecting the city from demons. After hearing everything, the director finally signed all the paperwork. From that moment on, the one-eyed man would officially act as their legal representative. He added that even though the boys had spent most of their lives inside a mental hospital and had almost no experience with the outside world, that fact alone didn't define who they really were. Sean smiled gently and said he truly believed the boys were good people at heart. He continued by telling the one-eyed man that if he believed the boys could be useful to the city, then he should make sure they were given the chance to prove themselves. More than anything, he hoped they would be allowed to live meaningful lives rather than being dismissed as nothing more than crazy people. After finishing the paperwork, everyone stepped outside so the director could say a proper goodbye to the boys. Jasper happily promised that they would definitely come back and visit him. But deep down, Sean honestly wouldn't mind if the boys never had to return to the hospital again. Soon after, they said farewell to the director and the other patients they had known for years. Then they left the hospital together with the one-eyed man to begin a new chapter. However, as they were leaving, the one-eyed man suddenly overheard them talking about something important: salary. The director quickly clarified that their monthly payments would still be transferred directly to the psychiatric hospital's account. Meanwhile, the demon rooster was trembling with fear. He realized that if these two humans hadn't returned in time earlier, he probably would have already been killed. Not long afterward, Levi and Jasper returned. which conveniently interrupted Jasper's attempt to continue the rooster's acupuncture session. At that exact moment, the demon suddenly felt a chilling sensation behind his neck, like the cold breath of death brushing against him. Before long, the one-eyed man announced that they had reached their destination, the headquarters of the city's Special Forces Division. The boys were immediately amazed. They had never seen rooms this enormous or machines this advanced and massive before. The demon rooster, however, sensed the powerful aura of warriors all around the building. He instantly realized he had walked straight into the mouth of death. Suddenly, several warriors approached and pointed directly at the rooster, loudly declaring that the creature was a demon. But the one-eyed man quickly told everyone to calm down and disperse. He explained that the situation was under control and that the demon had already been subdued. The warriors slowly backed away, though the rooster remained absolutely terrified by the entire situation. Then the one-eyed man gestured for the boys to follow him, and they walked deeper into one of the building's large wings. They soon arrived at a reception desk. The man asked the receptionist to register the two boys as new personnel and mark them specifically as warriors with innate bodies. The receptionist looked confused when she noticed that both boys were still wearing pajamas from a psychiatric hospital. The one-eyed man casually explained that they were just wearing cosplay outfits. The girl accepted the explanation and commented that the new recruits looked surprisingly young. She then handed them registration forms and asked whether they wanted to use the demon rooster to test their strength or if she should send it to the research department for an autopsy. Those words instantly terrified the demon rooster all over again. But the one-eyed man calmly told her to register the demon as Levi's personal pet. The receptionist was stunned. She couldn't believe that someone's pet could actually be a third-rank demon. She started wondering just how powerful these two new recruits were if they could control such a creature and were personally escorted by the department head. Soon afterward, they arrived at a laboratory for testing. Jasper became extremely excited when one of the machines surrounded him with glowing green energy. The system then displayed the results of the scan and announced that Jasper's current combat rank was 0. Jasper was completely shocked. A person with combat rank 0 had somehow beaten him again and again before. That meant Levi looked like an ordinary person, which made everyone confused about why they were even being tested. Soon Levi stepped forward for his own scan. Surprisingly, the system also reported that his combat rank was 0. Then the machine scanned the rooster and clearly displayed that its battle rank was 3. The one-eyed man frowned in confusion, unable to understand why the machine couldn't properly detect the abilities of these two boys. One of the technicians explained that the device simply couldn't detect any internal energy or special characteristics in their bodies. Because of that, he asked why the chief had brought two ordinary people into the Special Forces facility. The one-eyed man replied that they weren't ordinary fighters, but warriors with unique, innate bodies. However, the technician argued that other innate warriors could still be analyzed by the machine and assigned a combat rank. The one-eyed man insisted that even normal civilians showed measurable parameters on the device. Since these two showed none at all, that alone proved they were extraordinary. He ordered the technician to simply write in the report that their combat rank could not be determined. After finishing the test, he called the boys over and told them it was time to change into proper uniforms. The technician quietly wondered whether the chief truly intended to place these two ordinary-looking boys into the Special Forces, even though they weren't related to him at all. Meanwhile, someone brought out a brand-new collar for the demon rooster. The creature absolutely hated it and secretly vowed to take revenge someday for this humiliation. Jasper, however, was extremely excited when he received his brand-new Special Forces uniform. At the same time, the rooster was still quietly plotting revenge, realizing that he was currently trapped inside the very headquarters of his greatest enemies. Soon the one-eyed man entered the boys' new room and calmly told them that this place would now serve as their home where they could rest after completing their duties. He also explained that Special Forces warriors with innate bodies were assigned shared housing. Each apartment was designed for 2 people, and the building itself was equipped with a facial recognition security system to make sure only authorized residents could enter. Inside the apartment, each person had their own separate bedroom where they could rest in peace. From now on, this place wasn't just temporary housing, it was officially their new home. However, The one-eyed man reminded them that settling in wasn't the main reason they were here. It was time to focus on their responsibilities, although he assured them the job itself wouldn't be anything overly complicated. Their main task would simply be to patrol the city streets regularly and step in whenever civilians needed help or protection. At that moment, Jasper suddenly interrupted him with excitement. He proudly said that he had already improved his half-step universe rotation technique and wondered if he could try healing the man's damaged eye one more time. The one-eyed man looked genuinely surprised by that suggestion. Even though he knew these two behaved strangely, he hadn't expected that they might actually be worried about his condition. After thinking about it for a moment, he finally shrugged and said they could try again if Jasper really believed his method had improved. Jasper grinned widely and said there was just one small condition first. Before beginning the treatment, he needed to temporarily blind the man's remaining healthy eye. The one-eyed man immediately rejected that ridiculous proposal without even considering it for a second. Later that evening, the man returned to his office feeling uneasy. He realized with a nervous sigh that he had almost been convinced by those two again. Even though no one else seemed to notice, he reminded himself firmly of the truth. Those two boys were genuinely crazy. He snapped his fingers and quietly called out a name. A moment later, a ghost-like figure stepped out of the wall, appearing almost like a hologram. The man's name was Isaac. Isaac was a special forces warrior with an innate body and had already reached the 7th rank. He respectfully asked whether his leader had a new assignment for him. The one-eyed man asked if Isaac had noticed the two newcomers he had brought in earlier that day. Isaac calmly confirmed that he had already seen them. The man then ordered Isaac to secretly watch the two boys without letting them notice his presence. Isaac asked whether he should step in if something unexpected happened, but the one-eyed man told him not to interfere. Instead, he explained that if the boys somehow got themselves into real danger, Isaac's only job would be to escape quickly and protect his own life. He even added with a serious tone that the mission might be dangerous, so Isaac should probably write a will whenever he had some free time. Meanwhile, Jasper and Levi were sitting quietly again, patiently waiting for their unfortunate chicken to lay another egg. The demon rooster felt completely humiliated by this situation. Still, since he was trapped deep inside enemy territory, he forced himself to act obedient and pretend to be on their side. Even so, deep in his heart, he never forgot his dream of someday becoming a legendary demon hero who would devour all of humanity. After waiting a while, the boys eventually headed into the kitchen to cook themselves a simple meal using the eggs. While eating, they grabbed bottles of soy milk from the refrigerator, though they kept jokingly calling them Coke and Sprite. Isaac, who was secretly observing them from the shadows, couldn't understand why they called soy milk soda when the boss had clearly ordered that soy milk be delivered to them. He began to suspect that the two might be using some kind of secret code language while talking to each other. Suddenly, Levi paused and said quietly that he felt as if someone was watching them from somewhere nearby. Jasper looked around the room carefully, but eventually shrugged and said he couldn't see anything suspicious at all. Isaac smirked to himself while listening. His innate ability, hidden light, completely concealed his presence, even his internal energy, so neither humans nor demons had ever detected him before. Levi casually suggested that they should find whoever was spying on them and beat him up for sneaking around. Jasper, however, simply said they should finish eating first and get ready for work. Isaac quietly wondered why the chief had assigned him to watch these strange boys who somehow made even experienced warriors nervous. When the boys later walked into the common hall, many of the other warriors inside began staring at them with obvious curiosity. Some of them quietly whispered to each other, suspecting that the newcomers must have gotten in through personal connections. Just then, a warrior named Lewis suddenly rushed toward the unsuspecting boys, pulling something from his jacket pocket. Activating his ability, he threw a powerful punch directly toward Levi. At that exact moment, Levi slowly turned around and stared at the attacker with a completely emotionless expression. Lewis was convinced that these two must be the mysterious fighters who had defeated the 7th-ranked demons at the hospital. Levi simply looked confused, clearly having no idea what the man was talking about. Suddenly, Lewis burst into tears of relief and happiness. He said he knew the chief would never bring in weak relatives through favoritism. These two had to be real warriors. Soon afterward, the boys headed out to patrol the city. People on the streets stared in amazement as Levi calmly walked forward while leading the rooster on a leash. Before long, they noticed an elderly woman standing nearby who seemed to be searching for something anxiously. The boys approached her politely and asked if she needed help with anything. The old woman awkwardly checked her watch and explained that she had already been wandering around for 4 hours and now needed to go home. Levi and Jasper exchanged determined looks and promised that they would personally escort her home safely. Soon they gently supported the old woman by the arms and began walking with her down the street. She kept assuring them that her home was just a little farther ahead. However, even after walking for nearly an hour, they still hadn't reached her house, even though she continued saying they were almost there. Finally, the old woman sighed heavily and said she was getting very tired from all the walking. The boys immediately offered to carry her instead, so she wouldn't have to strain herself any further. Levi gently lifted the woman into his arms while Jasper continued pulling the rooster along on its leash. The demon rooster was completely exhausted by now and couldn't understand when this endless journey would finally end. Night soon fell, and they had already walked far beyond the city limits. Yet the old woman still insisted that her house was just ahead. Eventually, they reached a small house that looked more like an old barn. The woman thanked them warmly and said she felt incredibly lucky to have met such kind young men. She then reached into her basket and pulled out 2 simple flower wreaths, placing one gently on each boy's head. Levi and Jasper looked at each other with surprise and happily said the wreaths were actually very beautiful. They thanked the old woman sincerely for the gift before heading back toward the city, dragging the exhausted rooster behind them. From a distance, Isaac continued observing everything. Although he still didn't know the true extent of their strength, he could tell the boys were young and surprisingly promising. While walking through the dark streets, the rooster suddenly sensed powerful demonic energy waves nearby. He immediately realized this could be his chance to escape. The energy felt far stronger than his own 3rd-rank power, at least 5th rank. If he led these 2 to that demon, they would surely be eaten. With that thought, the rooster suddenly jumped up and ran toward the side, pulling the leash and causing the boys to stumble. Not far away near a shop, a fierce battle was already taking place. One powerful strike from the demon had just sent a warrior flying across the street. A group of 5th-rank warriors was fighting desperately against a 5th-rank demon that possessed a terrifying innate ability. The demon was far too strong for them. One of the warriors had already been severely injured, and a girl urgently called the control center, requesting immediate reinforcement from 6th-rank warriors. At that moment, the demon lashed out once again with terrifying force. The impact of its strike sent the surrounding warriors flying sideways across the street like rag dolls. Each of the monster's blows crackled with violent electrical energy. The air itself buzzed as lightning-like currents burst from its body, shocking the warriors so badly that even those standing nearby were jolted painfully. The injured warriors crashed against the walls of a nearby building. Right beside that building sat a small girl who, by some unfortunate accident, had wandered onto the street at night. She was crying helplessly, calling for her mother in a trembling voice. Seeing her there, Lewis immediately shouted at her to run away as fast as she could. But suddenly, one of the warriors noticed something horrifying. The demon's long, writhing tentacles were shooting straight toward the girl. Without hesitating, the warrior dashed forward at incredible speed, grabbing the girl and pulling her out of the path of the incoming strike just in time. Then, gathering every ounce of his strength, the warrior roared loudly as he launched himself back toward the monster in a desperate attempt to protect the child. Unfortunately, his bravery was not enough. Within moments, he was struck again and left critically wounded, unable to continue fighting. Of the entire squad, only one warrior remained standing. Even he began trembling slightly, fear creeping into his body. Before him stood a terrifying 5th-rank demon, a royal electric eel with a terrifying innate ability known as electric arc. The warrior stared at the monster helplessly, unsure what he could possibly do against such an overwhelming enemy. At that moment, a rooster suddenly ran out from around the corner. The demon rooster's eyes widened with excitement when he realized this wasn't just any 5th-rank demon, but a royal electric eel with a powerful innate ability. He had heard stories that even some 6th and 7th rank demons avoided provoking such a creature. That meant this eel might finally become his salvation. The rooster grinned wickedly, convinced that this would finally be the end of those two humans who had humiliated him. Soon Levi and Jasper caught up with their runaway pet. They were both surprised to see such a massive eel thrashing around in the street. The system quickly informed Levi that the creature was an eel. Meanwhile, the eel noticed the rooster wearing a collar filled with human energy and looked at it suspiciously. When the eel sensed the collar's energy, it assumed that the rooster had become a servant of humans. The rooster immediately crowed angrily, declaring that he had only endured humiliation in order to infiltrate the enemy's territory, and that one day he would become a legendary demon hero who devoured humanity. The eel looked down at the 3rd-rank rooster with clear arrogance and said coldly that such a weak and pathetic creature could never become a hero. Meanwhile, the only conscious 5th-rank warrior saw Levi and Jasper standing nearby and quickly tried to warn them. He shouted that the demon was far too powerful and that anyone below rank 7 should not even think about approaching it. But Jasper wasn't worried at all. Instead, he was already thinking about how they might cook the eel after defeating it. Levi then calmly told Jasper to wait there while he went to catch the eel himself. The wounded warrior desperately tried to stop him, warning that the demon's electric attacks were incredibly powerful. But Levi ignored the warning completely and simply reached out his hand, placing his palm directly against the eel. Instantly, a massive electric current surged through Levi's body. The 5th-rank warrior who had grabbed his arm earlier was shocked as well. Inside his heart, the warrior couldn't help feeling bitter anger toward Levi for dragging him into such a dangerous situation. His body couldn't withstand the electricity any longer. He was thrown backward and quickly lost consciousness just like the others. Levi and the eel both looked down at the fallen warrior with confusion. The eel, whose name was Cole, was equally confused. This human seemed weak, yet he had somehow endured the eel's powerful current. Levi then turned toward Jasper and commented that the demon's electricity reminded him of the energy they felt during training. Still, Levi added calmly that the sensation felt rather weak compared to what he was used to. Hearing that insult, the eel became furious. Determined to prove his strength, he unleashed an even stronger attack, blasting Levi with 10,000 volts of electricity. Even that wasn't enough. In the end, the eel was completely defeated. Levi casually twisted the defeated eel into a knot and threw it over his shoulder like a sack before heading back toward headquarters. Cole couldn't understand what was happening or where he was being dragged. Desperate, he turned toward the rooster. He begged the rooster to save him. Even though the eel had insulted him earlier, the rooster said he would at least try to help. From a distance, Isaac watched the entire scene unfold. He stood frozen in shock, barely believing what he had just witnessed. He knew that resistance to such extreme electricity was an incredible ability, yet Levi had defeated the king electric eel all by himself. Even now, Isaac still couldn't fully understand just how powerful these mysterious newcomers actually were. Soon the boys returned to their apartment and dragged the eel straight into the kitchen, clearly intending to cook it. The captured demon turned once again toward the rooster, desperately begging him to save his life. The rooster replied gloomily that he was trying his best before turning away, pretending to search for some way to help. But when he noticed a splash of eel blood on his cheek, he froze in horror. That night, the other warriors living nearby suddenly noticed an amazing smell drifting through the building. The aroma was so delicious that some of them even woke up from sleep. Levi was cooking the eel at that exact moment. Jasper's eyes lit up with excitement when Levi presented his new dish. The taste was so incredible that Jasper devoured the food almost instantly and immediately asked for another serving. Levi then decided to share the meal with their pet as well and held out a spoon containing a piece of eel meat toward the rooster. The rooster stared at it in disbelief. Not only had these humans killed and cooked his own kind right in front of him, now they were trying to make him eat it. The rooster realized that death might actually be better than this humiliation. If a demon consumed another demon's flesh, their body would absorb too much energy and eventually explode. Although the explosion would grant a temporary surge of power, it would ultimately destroy the one who consumed the flesh. Still, the rooster decided that if he exploded, The blast might harm these humans and avenge his suffering. With that thought, he bravely decided to take a bite. Tears filled his eyes as he slowly chewed a piece of the eel's meat. But suddenly his expression changed. The meat was unbelievably delicious, rich with flavor and aroma. Meanwhile, the eel, who imagined himself already in the afterlife surrounded by fellow demons, could hardly believe that the rooster had actually eaten him. At the very least, the eel comforted himself with the thought that he had been eaten after becoming a tasty meal. Suddenly, the rooster felt a powerful surge of energy spreading through his entire body. His body filled with strength and violent power, fueling his desire to take revenge on the humans. With sudden speed, he darted forward, aiming to stab Jasper with his sharp beak. But just as he lunged, a powerful palm struck him squarely in the face. It was Levi. The blow was so strong that the rooster was instantly knocked across the floor. Jasper stood there looking completely puzzled, unable to piece together what had just happened. His mind was still trying to catch up when his friend casually explained the situation. Apparently, the rooster had lunged forward and tried to snatch a chunk of eel right out of his hands. The whole thing had happened so suddenly that Jasper hadn't even realized why the bird had acted so aggressively in the first place. The demon was utterly stunned. It simply couldn't accept what had just occurred. Being defeated so effortlessly felt almost unreal to him. Even though a terrifying surge of power was still pulsing through his body, he couldn't believe that his fate might end here, humiliated and defeated in such an absurd and undignified way. The poor rooster looked absolutely miserable, wobbling weakly as if something was terribly wrong with it. Watching the bird struggle like that made Jasper uneasy. After observing it for a moment, he began to suspect that the chicken might actually be sick or suffering from some strange illness. However, the main character calmly stepped forward and reassured everyone that there was no reason to panic. According to him, Jasper possessed a rare and remarkable skill, magical acupuncture. This mysterious technique was said to be capable of curing nearly any disease, no matter how strange or severe it might be. When the rooster finally regained consciousness, the sight before its eyes nearly made its soul leave its body. Sticking out from its stomach were 13 thin needles, each carefully placed. The bizarre scene was so shocking that for a brief moment the rooster felt like it had almost been sent straight to the afterlife. The moment the boys noticed that the rooster had finally opened its eyes and returned to its senses, their faces lit up with relief. They had been worried that their strange treatment might not work. Seeing the bird alive and conscious again made them both genuinely happy. Suddenly, the rooster felt something unusual spreading through its body. It was a strange but pleasant sensation. Its body suddenly felt incredibly light, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. At the same time, a surge of fresh strength rushed through its veins, filling it with renewed energy. Only then did the rooster realize what had actually happened. It had advanced to a higher rank. Its power had broken through to the 4th rank, transforming it into an electric rooster demon. Along with this evolution, it had also gained a brand new ability, the terrifying power of an electric arc. The rooster was completely dumbfounded. Not only had it survived the ordeal, but it had also managed to break through its limits and reach the 4th rank. The situation felt so unbelievable that it struggled to accept that this incredible transformation had really happened. Isaac had been quietly watching everything unfold from the side, and the scene left him deeply disturbed. He simply couldn't wrap his head around what he had witnessed. One demon had devoured another, yet instead of exploding from the incompatible energies, it had somehow grown stronger and even increased its rank. The following morning, Isaac wasted no time. He headed straight to the office of the one-eyed man. As soon as he arrived, he began recounting everything he had seen the previous evening, carefully describing each strange event that had taken place. The one-eyed man listened in silence at first, but soon he covered his face with both hands in frustration. With a tired sigh, he declared that nothing in the world could possibly convince him that this fellow's acupuncture technique actually worked the way Isaac claimed. He went on to explain that years of scientific research had already established a clear rule. Human energy and demonic energy were fundamentally incompatible. According to every study conducted so far, those two types of energy simply could not coexist or blend together safely. Whenever the two energies came into contact, they triggered a powerful rejection reaction that usually ended badly. Because of this, the one-eyed man warned Isaac not to spread this strange story to anyone else for the time being. He suggested that what they had witnessed might simply be a rare, natural trait unique to that individual demon. It could be some unusual inborn characteristic. Because of that possibility, he didn't want the story to mislead others or create confusion. After a moment of silence, the one-eyed man changed the subject and asked Isaac what had happened at the battlefield after they had taken the electric coal. Isaac replied that the 6th-rank warriors and the supply team had arrived just in time, preventing any casualties. However, there was one thing that bothered Isaac. The credit for Levi's achievement had been given to 4 clueless warriors who had merely finished off the unconscious demons. In reality, they hadn't done the hardest part of the fight. The one-eyed man waved his hand dismissively and said that there was nothing wrong with that arrangement. In his opinion, such minor details weren't worth arguing about, and it would be better if they simply let the matter go. But Isaac refused to back down so easily. He insisted that the achievements of newcomers were extremely important because they directly influenced their position in the team rankings and even affected how their individual combat strength was evaluated. Because of that, Isaac couldn't understand why anyone would treat the situation like a trivial matter. He added that if necessary, he could report the truth to the research department and even testify as a witness to what had really happened. Hearing that, the one-eyed man quickly tried to stop him. He explained that those 4 warriors had still contributed something during the operation, and their efforts shouldn't be dismissed completely. So he suggested that they simply overlook the issue this time and let it pass quietly. In truth, his real concern was different. He didn't want the situation to attract too much attention. If the story spread, Tracy might eventually hear about everything. Meanwhile, Levi and Jasper were completely unaware of this discussion. The 2 of them had already headed to the marketplace, casually strolling through the streets with their unusual pet following along beside them. The rooster still couldn't quite process what had happened to it. Because of these 2 humans, it had unexpectedly broken through to the 4th rank and even gained the electric ability that once belonged to the eel demon. However, after thinking about it for a moment, the rooster forced itself to calm down. It reminded itself that it absolutely shouldn't feel grateful toward these 2. After all, they forced it to lay eggs every single day, and it would never forget such humiliating treatment. In fact, the rooster had already made up its mind. One day, it would use the power it had gained from them to find a stronger demon. After forming an alliance with that powerful partner, it planned to return and destroy the 2 humans. Just then, Levi suddenly heard a desperate cry for help echoing somewhere nearby. At the same time, the rooster sensed something else entirely. A powerful wave of demonic energy spreading through the air. Judging from the intensity of that energy, it was clearly a 6th-rank demon. Meanwhile, Jasper spotted a frightened girl nearby and instinctively stepped forward, assuming that she needed assistance. Unfortunately, her boyfriend immediately misunderstood the situation and became furious that a strange man was approaching her. Without even trying to ask what was going on, the jealous boyfriend angrily swung his arm toward Jasper, intending to strike him and drive him away. But the moment his hand cut through the air, he realized something strange. The white-haired young man he had tried to hit was already gone. Jasper had vanished along with his friend, running off somewhere at incredible speed. Watching them leave, the rooster sneered inwardly. It was convinced that the 2 humans had just run straight into danger. This time, it believed that it and its new ally would finally be able to send those 2 straight to the afterlife. Sure enough, a fierce battle was already unfolding in a clearing near the lake. In the middle of the fight, a powerful force suddenly hurled a man through the air before slamming him heavily onto the grass. Moments later, a terrifying figure slowly approached the fallen man. It was the demon responsible for the attack, stepping closer with frightening calm. The injured man was completely confused. He couldn't understand how this nightmare had started. After all, the only thing he had done earlier was buy a small pig from one of his friends. He had simply planned to spend a relaxing day outdoors, roasting pork over a campfire in nature. Never in his wildest imagination had he considered that the cute little pig he bought would actually turn out to be a demon in disguise. His companions tried to gather their courage and step forward to rescue him, but the terrifying presence of the demon made their legs tremble uncontrollably. Fear froze them in place. Then the demon calmly walked up to the man lying on the ground and suddenly kicked his leg hard with its hoof, causing him to cry out in pain. After snorting loudly, the creature revealed its true demonic form. With a chilling voice, it declared that it planned to devour every human standing there. The monster turned out to be a 6th-rank demon known as a royal illusion pig. Its natural ability was incredibly oppressive, radiating an aura that filled everyone nearby with dread. Although it normally disguised itself as a harmless piglet, the creature possessed a terrifying power that forced fear into the hearts of anyone who came close to it. Just as the pig prepared to attack the injured man again, Levi and Jasper suddenly rushed into the clearing. Without hesitation, they struck the demon and sent it flying straight into the lake. The surrounding men stared in confusion, unable to understand what was happening. But then they noticed something important. The two newcomers were wearing the distinctive uniforms of Special Forces soldiers with natural bodies. Realizing that trained soldiers had arrived, the men quickly decided to carry their injured friend to the hospital. They left the dangerous situation entirely in the hands of the professionals. At that moment, the rooster secretly turned toward the demon pig and whispered to it, urging it to help eliminate the two humans who had earlier kicked it through the air. In the rooster's mind, everything was finally coming together. With the assistance of the royal illusion pig, it believed it could finally take revenge and kill those two troublesome humans. However, before the rooster could even turn around to check on the situation again, something unbelievable had already happened. Levi and Jasper had dragged the piglet out of the water and were calmly roasting it over a fire. By the time evening arrived, the delicious smell of cooked meat filled the air. The boys sat near the fire, and once the roasting was finished, they eagerly prepared to taste their meal. As they were eating, the protagonist suddenly heard a mysterious voice echo inside his mind. It informed him that he had successfully broken through to the final stage of the energy cultivation technique. Hearing this news, Jasper immediately grew excited. He suggested that this might be the perfect opportunity to test his acupuncture needles again. Now that his friend had become stronger, they could even attempt his newest technique, something he dramatically called the complete rotation of the universe. The protagonist agreed without much hesitation, which instantly filled Jasper with excitement and anticipation. Jasper quickly began the acupuncture procedure with great focus. However, as he continued working, he soon realized that his new technique still had some flaws and would need further improvement. Meanwhile, the rooster quietly watched everything while thinking to itself. Now that it had reached the 4th rank, it felt completely fearless. In its mind, it had become the most powerful 4th-rank electric rooster demon. Then its gaze slowly shifted toward Levi, who was lying nearby, completely unconscious. His breathing seemed extremely weak, making the rooster suspect that he might be on the verge of death. The rooster wondered whether it should seize this rare opportunity and attack while Levi was still helpless. But just as it was thinking this through, it suddenly noticed something else. Jasper was now standing alone without anyone protecting him. Seeing the chance, the rooster suddenly rushed forward at full speed, planning to stab Jasper again with its sharp beak. However, right at that moment, Jasper calmly grabbed the pig's roasted snout and shoved it straight into the rooster's open beak. The rooster froze in shock. It had never expected Jasper to counterattack in such a strange and unexpected way. Panicking, the rooster immediately tried to spit out the piece of demonic meat. It was certain that swallowing something like that might tear its body apart from the inside. But the moment the flavor spread across its tongue, the rooster hesitated. The meat was unbelievably delicious, rich, sweet, and strangely irresistible. No matter how hard it tried, it simply couldn't bring itself to spit it out.